Hello and welcome to MTG Deck Tech. Today we're doing a deck deep dive on the first deck I've created in Theros Standard. So this is Mono Black Devotion. It's still a bit raw, so the numbers of the cards might change at some point, but I think I've got a pretty good view on how this deck is going to shape out. So what we want to do is get a lot of devotion and drain your opponent with the Grey Merchant of Asphodel, which of course makes your opponent losing X life, where X is your devotion to black, and you gain the same life. So devotion means you have like one devotion per mana symbol. So if you, for example, have a free generic mana and one black mana, you only have one devotion. But if you have 3 black mana, you have 3 devotion. So that's basically the devotion you have. I have the Cauldron Familiar in this deck because it drains a lot of life. It can get back from the graveyard with the Witch's Oven combo, of which I have 3. You all probably should know this combo until now, but Cauldron itself gives you 1 devotion, and it's just fine card to have, just to drain your opponent, stay alive. Cauldron, of course, can block and be sacrificed and get back, so your opponent can't attack with, or can attack with 1 less creature for each Cauldron Familiar you have on the battlefield, basically. So that's a nice thing. I do also have Foulmire Knight in the 1 slot, because first of all it has Death Touch, which can also really disincentivize your opponent from attacking, but you can also use the Adventure Half to draw a card. You really don't have that much card draw, only the Castle Locthwains really in this deck, so that's why I put in Foulmire Knight, just to draw more cards. I also have 3 copies of Omen of the Dead. I think this is one of the most underrated cards for this type of archetype, because it only costs 1 mana and gets you a creature back from your graveyard, which could be something like the Ayara, for example, or even the Gary, the Grey Merchant. And so I have 3 in the main board, 1 in the sideboard, and you could also sacrifice it to scry 2, but most of the time I'm just gonna keep it on the battlefield to give me 1 more black devotion. So that's a very nice card for this. Which is often, by the way, the only card that doesn't give you devotion in this deck. Timurid, Chosen from the Dead, is a legendary enchantment creature. It's a demigod, and its toughness is equal to your devotion to black, so it's a very nice blocker. You can also exile cards from opponent's graveyard and gain 1 life for each creature card exiled this way. So it's very nice against aggro decks that want to attack you, because it can block. It can also give you some life back. So I have 2 of those in deck. It gives you 2 devotion, so it's a very nice, efficient card. Also giving you 2 devotion is the Yarok's Fenlurker, which also makes your opponent essentially discard a card, but it's even better because they have to exile their card. You could also pump it, but most of the times you don't use that ability. Yarok is essentially good because you can bring it back sometimes. For example, with the Nightmare Shepard or with the Omen of the Dead, you can just bring it back and let your opponent discard even more cards. So that's a nice thing. It also has 2 devotion, which really helps you and is on curve. Ayara, First of Locthwain, is a card that synergizes really well with the Cauldron Familiar combo. Whenever a black creature enters your battlefield, you gain 1 life and your opponent loses 1 life. So it's just a way to drain your opponent even faster. It also has 3 black, which counts wonderfully for your devotion. And it's just a very nice card all around to have. Murderous, you could also sacrifice another creature and draw a card, which might come in handy at some point because you don't have that much card draw. Murderous Rider, we've talked a lot about Murderous Rider in other deck techs. I don't think I have to talk a lot about it. It's perfect removal that can get rid of creatures or planeswalkers. You can also put it on the battlefield just to have 2 devotion and a 2/3 lifelinker. So Murderous Rider, definitely a 4-off in each of those mono black decks. Erebos Bleak-Hearted is one of the payoffs for your devotion, because if your devotion is 5 or more, it is a creature, and it's a 5/6 indestructible creature on top of that, so that's a very nice ability. But even if you don't have the devotion ready yet, you can pay 2 life if your creature dies, and if you do, you draw a card. So this is another card draw engine here that can really work well with Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven. because whenever Cauldron Familiar gets sacrificed by the oven, you lose 2 life, draw a card, but you get 1 life back because Cauldron can come back into the battlefield. So that's a very nice card to play around, just draw a lot of cards, especially when you have like a standstill on the board field where nothing really happens. You can just sacrifice Cauldrons, get some more cards, and just do your thing. So I have also 1 Leyline of the Void in the main deck because I think Graveyard Synergies, Escape, etc. are very high priced in this format. Also Cat Oven decks, of course, when your opponent plays mono black as well. So the Leyline of the Void can help you because whenever a creature gets into the graveyard from your opponent, they will exile it. So they can't have any graveyard synergies going on. You want to draw this in your opening hand because you can play it for free and just have 2 devotion for free, which is very insane in this type of deck. But it's also nice to just play it later if your opponent has some graveyard synergies going. It won't exile cards that are already in the graveyard, but if new cards get into the graveyard, they are gone forever. The Nightmare Shepard I only have 3 of because I needed to cut something in order to get my Omens and my Foulmire Knights and make this deck more aggressive, but a lot of people are playing 4 of. It's a very nice card because whenever a creature you control dies, you can exile it, create a token that's a copy of this creature. It's a 1/1, but it has all the abilities. So if the Grey Merchant of Asphodel, for example, dies, you can just copy it and boom, hit your opponent again for the devotion cost. You also have to see that the copy of the creature also counts towards your devotion. Although it's a token, it still counts towards your devotion, which is something that I didn't expect to happen, but it's even a better card than I would have expected because of it. Grey Merchant of Asphodel, I have already talked a lot about. It's the main way you want to finish your games, because whenever you have a lot of devotion on your battlefield, you can just play him, drain your opponent for a lot of life. It can also save you sometimes because it drains a lot of life. So yeah, it's just a nice card. It's also 2 devotion, so it gives you 2 devotion to your devotion count, and whenever you play it, you will deal at least 2 damage, most of the times much more than that. Erebos Intervention is just a nice removal. It's also giving you a lot of life, and it helps you against this type of indestructible enchantment creatures that you have running around in this format. Finally, the lands. I've already talked about Locthwain, which you can use to draw cards, and I have 24 lands in total. This is a pretty nice land count, I think, in this type of deck, because yeah, you have some bigger creatures like a Grey Merchant, but most of the times you're just playing these lower curve creatures in this deck. So you have a mana cost average of 2.5. So with 24 lands, you're still making sure you're gonna hit your big creatures at some point, but you only really need to hit them when you have a lot of devotion on the battlefield. So it's not that bad that it could take a while. In my sideboard, I have another Omen of the Dead and another Witch's Oven, just to have something to shuffle around if I need some more aggressive strategies, or if I want to go more on the Cauldron Familiar side. So I put them into the sideboard. Legion's End is just a very nice removal spell, especially against aggro decks that have a lot of small creatures. That spell will also give you some information on your opponent's hand, and in the best cases, it can exile more than 1 stuff from your opponent. So that's a nice one. Noxious Grasp, we already know, against green or white, that's a nice removal card, gains you 1 life. Perfect against green aggro decks, you want to bring it in there. I have 2 copies of the Elder Spell also, because yeah, a lot of opponents seem to be playing some Planeswalkers right now, so I want to get rid of those. It won't really help me when I don't have a Planeswalker of my own, but I can bring in Liliana as well to make use of the put 2 loyalty counters on your own Planeswalker ability of the Elder Spell. Drag to the Underworld is a very nice card against creature-based matchups. You can just cast it for 2 mana most of the times, because you will have 2 devotion lying around, and you can just destroy a creature for 2 mana, which is insanely efficient. And yeah, the only thing really better as removal in your deck is the Murderous Rider, because Murderous Rider can of course hit more things and yeah, doesn't need the devotion to be efficient. But Drag Me to the Underworld, definitely against opponents that are gonna play a lot of creatures, you want to have that. E2 Extinction is a card I'm not really that sure about. It was in the Saffron Olive deck, which I used to build around or to modify in order to create this deck. It's nice against Planeswalkers, it's nice against indestructible creatures because it's an exile effect. You also have some kind of Pseudo Surveil, which can really help you. But 4 mana is a lot, and yeah, I'm hoping I'm finding a better version of this at some point, but in black, it's possibly not really feasible. I also have 3 more copies of Leyline of the Void, just against Cat Oven decks or other decks that are using the graveyard. I'm just gonna put 4 of those in. The chances are, of course, much higher if you have 4 to get it in your opening hand. So you might have maybe even 2 of those and can just get like 4 devotion on the battlefield in the best case. Or maybe it's not the best case, depending on what other cards you have, of course. But yeah, Leyline is just a nice card to have in your turn 1 hand. Bolas the Citadel is a card I want to bring in when I am looking for a longer game where life totals aren't as important, because you can just play cards by using your life total and getting them from the top of your deck directly onto the battlefield. You could also sacrifice 10 non-land permanents and kill your opponent with 10 life loss. So Bolas the Citadel is definitely a card I want to bring in the longer matchup. I'm also gonna bring in Liliana in those longer, grindier matchups. And yeah, Liliana, you all know Liliana until now, I think. That War of the Spark Planeswalker that can do so many things. It can create zombies. Whenever creature you control dies, you draw a card. Each player can sacrifice 2 creatures, so it is some decent removal, and its ultimate is just gonna win you the game most of the time. And yeah, but it does cost 6 mana, so I have found in the main board it's not really that feasible, because if you have an aggro matchup and you have a Liliana in hand, it's most of the time not going to do anything, even in mid-range matchups. Many of the times you want to kill your opponent first with your Grey Merchant. But yeah, if the game takes longer, it's definitely a card you want to have. It also synergizes very well with Ayara, because the tokens are black and they will drain your opponent when you have an Ayara on the battlefield. So Liliana, definitely something I like to bring in at some point. And I also have a 3rd copy here of Erebos Intervention, in case your opponent has a lot of those, or it's a 2nd copy, not a 3rd copy. But in case your opponent has a lot of those indestructible gods, it's very nice to bring this in and E2 Extinction in, to at least have 3 cards in your deck to can deal with that. It's not the greatest thing for you to happen if your opponent has those indestructibles, but I think you can work around it. Most of the times you don't even need to get rid of them, because you can just have your own indestructible Erebos against them, or just kill them with Grey Merchant of Asphodel before they can do anything. So yeah, you have a lot of options in those matchups. So this is the deck. I'm probably gonna work around with it some more. I'm probably also gonna make some gameplay videos with it, because it's really fun to drain your opponents with Gary. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this instant deck tech here from me. Until next time, this was MTG Deck Tech signing off.